Keanu Reeves spent decades carrying a secret. The world kept trying to guess his name was always linked to hers. Sandra Bullock, like two halves of a story that never turned its final page. He stayed silent, she never pressed, but now on the edge of 60, during a quiet moment no one expected, Keanu finally speaks, and what he says will change everything. Oh, and before we continue, tell us what's your favorite Keanu Reeves movie of all time. Let us know in the comments. It was a different kind of night. Special studio setup created just to celebrate Keanu Reeves' 60th birthday. Everything about it felt intentional, like a tribute, but not the overly grand or distant kind. It was intimate, human, real. The big screens showed movie posters, behind-the-scenes footage, clips from interviews long past. Even a replica of the Matrix Reloaded couch was part of the set. And the crowd laughed. Just seeing it, Keanu walked into thunderous applause, wearing that familiar, humble smile, the one that always seemed like he still didn't quite believe he was that loved. His hair was a little longer than usual, stare with gray. He wore black, of course, like he always did. A quiet figure, almost ghost-like, yet completely present. The host, a blend of seasoned comedian and master of heartfelt interviews, welcomed him with a grin. 60 years old and still not aging seriously. "Are you made of wax or do you drink unicorn blood?" Keanu chuckled, rubbing his beard with a self-conscious gesture. "I survive on memes and nostalgia seems to be working." The audience erupted. The tone was easy, full of jokes and memories. They talked about the 90s, about action movies that defied physics, about how Keanu always looked like he'd just run 10 miles in every scene. The host played clips on the screen, bloopers from Speed, behind-the-scenes moments, one where Sandra Bullock was laughing so hard she almost fell off the prop bus. People in the audience laughed, pointed at the screen, and elbowed their friends for a few moments. It felt like everyone had traveled back to their teenage years. Then the host leaned in, smile still playful, but with a hint of reverence. "We've got something special for you, or maybe for all of us, really." The studio darkened, the speakers began to play the unmistakable music from Speed, and the montage began. Explosions, tires screeching, Sandra at the wheel, Keanu in motion, both of them drenched in tension and charm. The kind of chemistry that never needed to be explained. It just was. The cuts were quick, dramatic, beautifully edited. Intense action scenes punctuated by stolen glances, close-ups of smiles, quick flashes of something unspoken. The audience cheered at first, then gradually they quieted. Not because they weren't enjoying it, but because something deeper was happening. They were feeling it, the camera in a slow pan cutto. Keanu, at first he was smiling along with the rest of them, nodding at familiar faces, reliving the adrenaline. But then his expression changed. It was subtle, just a flicker. He leaned forward, barely, but enough. His eyes locked onto one still image that appeared mid-montage, a candid photo. Him and Sandra sitting between takes, laughing at something off camera. He's looking at her in the picture. She's unaware, smiling freely. The host caught the shift. It was quick but undeniable. And so he didn't interrupt, he let the silence grow. Keanu blinked slowly, eyes still on the image. "That photo," he said, voice soft, "that was a real moment, not part of the film. It was during a break. I remember it clearly." The audience fell quiet. This wasn't the actor anymore, this was the man stripped of character. No script, just memory. It was after a long day of shooting. Everyone was tired but Sandra. He paused, the name landing like a stone in still water. She had this way of making everything feel lighter. Even the hard days, even the quiet ones. The host shifted in his seat. Something had changed. The mood wasn't heavy, but it wasn't light anymore either. It was something in between. Delicate Keanu didn't look at the host, he kept his eyes on the screen. People always said we had chemistry. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes, but what they saw on screen, he stopped, breathed, then softer. I was falling in love with her. The air in the room changed somewhere. The audience, someone gasped audibly. It wasn't dramatic, it was just honest. Keanu glanced at the host, then looked down, and I didn't say a word. A beat, then another. Everyone thought it was just acting. But for me, it wasn't. I was falling, and I kept it to myself. The host sat still, caught off guard. His instinct as a showman told him to jump in with a question, lighten the mood, but something told him not to just let Keanu speak, and Keanu did. I think I told myself it wasn't the right time, that work came first, or that I wasn't enough, or maybe he trailed off, then nodded to himself. Maybe I was just afraid. The montage ended on the screen behind them. A freeze frame of Keanu and Sandra side by side in costume, young, hopeful, timeless. The host leaned in, eyes wide. Did she ever know? Keanu shook his head almost imperceptibly. No, I never told her, not even once. The audience was silent. You could hear the sound of someone shifting in their chair, a cough muffled by a sleeve. It wasn't tension, it was reverence. Everyone knew something rare was happening, something honest. And then it came, that final moment, that pause that felt like the edge of a cliff. Keanu looked back at the screen, his voice steady but low. There's something I've never told anyone, not even her. The silence hung thick in the room. Heavy but not oppressive. It was the kind of silence that made people sit up straighter, afraid to breathe too loudly. The kind you don't interrupt because something real is about to be said. Keanu leaned back in his chair slightly, his hands resting loosely on his lap. He wasn't performing. He wasn't selling a story. He was remembering. I've never told this before, he said, voice still low. Not in an interview, not to friends, not even to her. The host nodded, encouraging, but quiet. The audience had faded for Keanu, at least for now. It was just him and a memory. I fell for Sandra during Speed. He smiled faintly. The kind of smile that comes from nostalgia and ache all tangled together. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't even physical. It was just us. We'll oft at the same things. We'd sit in silence for minutes, not feeling awkward at all. You don't get that a lot, that comfort. He looked at the host, then down again. Something in his posture softened. She had this way of noticing things, not just about me, about everyone. She'd see a crew member looking tired and bring them a coffee or make a joke just to lift someone's spirit. But it wasn't showy, it was just who she was. His voice slowed. And I think being around that kind of light when you've lived with a lot of darkness, it does something to you. The host shifted clearly. Moved. Did she ever give you signs that she felt the same? Keanu shook his head gently. Maybe, I don't know. Sometimes I'd catch her looking at me with this softness, but I always second-guessed it. I always assumed it was friendship or kindness, or just her being her. He let out a quiet laugh, short, dry. The truth is, it wasn't about what she felt, it was about what I couldn't let myself feel. A pause. Then at the time, I was carrying so much loss, things people didn't even know about. Yet my daughter had died, Jennifer. He stopped. The name landed like a stone. She was gone not long after. The audience held still. Some covered their mouths without realizing. Others lowered their heads. Keanu took a slow breath. When you lose people like that, you start to believe that love is just another thing that disappears, that it's something the world takes from you, not something it gives. He looked up again, this time directly at the host. His eyes were clear, not teary but deep, with something older than grief, something like wisdom worn thin by time. So I stayed quiet. I told myself I was protecting her, or that I didn't want to ruin what we had. But the truth is, I was scared. I thought I'd break her, or that I'd break myself. The host's voice was gentle now, almost like a whisper, so you just let it go. Keanu looked at the floor, then nodded once, no a beat. He looked back up, and for the first time his voice trembled, not with weakness but with weight. I carried it for 25 years. The air thickened again. The audience didn't move. It wasn't about Keanu Reeves, the actor, anymore. It was about a man who had kept something tender, something true, locked away for half his life. The host leaned forward, visibly shaken. "Why now?" Keanu smiled, but it was a sad smile. Not from regret exactly, but from the ache of time. "Because there comes a point," he said, "when silence doesn't protect you anymore, it just buries you." He paused, then added, "And because, there's something I never told her." The host tilted his head still. Keanu nodded still. The camera zoomed. In slightly catching the subtle shift in his expression, I wrote her a letter. A murmur passed through the audience. "A letter," the host echoed. Keanu sat up slightly. His hands, once still, were now loosely clasped together after the second Speed movie. Didn't happen. We drifted, not on purpose. Life just happened. I was dealing with a lot, she was too. But I never stopped thinking about her, about us, even if it was just a could have been. He paused, and one night, I don't remember what triggered it, I sat down and wrote her a letter. He glanced at the audience for the first time since his confession began. It wasn't a love letter, not exactly. It wasn't asking for anything, it was just a truth I hadn't said out loud. The host leaned in, eyes locked on his guest. "Did you ever send it?" Keanu hesitated, then softly, "No." The word felt heavy, final. He looked off to the side. "I kept that letter in a drawer for 15 years. You could hear the breath catch in the audience. I read it sometimes." He continued, "When I needed to remember who I used to be, or what I was afraid of." The host swallowed hard. "Do you still have it?" Keanu nodded slowly. "I do." A pause, then he turned toward the camera, not for dramatic effect, but as if speaking to someone who might be listening, watching. "Maybe it's time I finally read it out loud." The lights dimmed slightly. The studio shifted almost imperceptibly into something quieter, more sacred-like. Everyone in the room had instinctively agreed. "We'll hold this moment together." Keanu didn't pull out a physical letter. He didn't need to. You could tell he had memorized it, or maybe he'd lived it so long that it lived inside him. He closed his eyes and then gently, almost like a prayer, "Sandra, you probably don't remember the exact day I fell for you, but I do. It wasn't dramatic. You weren't wearing anything fancy. You were holding a sandwich in one hand and teasing me about forgetting my lines. And then you laughed, and it hit me how rare that sound was. Not just your laugh, but what it did to me. I didn't know how to say it. Then I didn't think I deserved to. You were sunlight. I was trying to survive the shadows, so I stayed quiet. And I told myself it was enough to be near you, to make you laugh, to protect you on screen. Even if I didn't know how to do it in real life, I've lived with that silence. And maybe I always will, but you should know it, even if it changes nothing, and that you were for a long time the closest thing I had to peace. You didn't know it, but you were my quiet place." He opened his eyes. His voice, though steady, carried something deeper now, something that echoed beyond the walls of the studio. "I never sent it because I thought I had time." The audience sat in reverent silence, then with a final glance to the host. "But something happened recently. Something that made me realize I might be running out of time." There was a long pause after Keanu's words faded. Not the kind of pause you fill with a joke or applause, the kind that asks to be honored. The audience sat still, the host sat still. The silence wasn't awkward, it was sacred. Keanu exhaled quietly, his eyes no longer fixed on the camera or the crowd. He was somewhere else now in memory, in places most people don't visit unless they have to. People always say I'm private, he said at last, that I keep to myself. And they're right, I do. He looked up gently. But sometimes silence isn't privacy, sometimes it's protection. The host didn't speak. He didn't need to. When you lose people early, Keanu continued, your mind does something strange. It starts to believe that anything you love will be taken from you. It starts keeping score. He folded his hands, his fingers tightening slightly. My daughter, she died before she even had a chance to cry. And then Jennifer, she was my anchor, my friend, my everything, and she left. And after that, it felt like love was a door I couldn't open anymore. His voice didn't break it. Didn't need to. The weight was in his stillness. I got used to being alone. It was easier. Predictable. I could still care about people. I could still show up. But I never let anyone all the way in. A faint smile passed his lips. One that held no joy. Just recognition. I thought I was protecting others from me. But really I was protecting myself from the idea that I didn't deserve happiness, that I was damaged. The host's eyes shone lightly, but he didn't blink it away. He let the moment be so. When Sandra came into my life, Keanu went on. It wasn't just attraction. It wasn't even romance. It was clarity. She had this way of making things make sense. I'd be spinning inside my head. And then we'd sit next to each other in the trailer sharing a sandwich and everything would just slow down. He looked at the host. I thought I had to be whole before I could. Love someone like her, I thought she deserved better. Cleaner. Brighter. He paused, but I see now that maybe what she needed wasn't perfect. Maybe she just needed someone to be present. And I wasn't. The audience was silent. Many of them visibly moved. Keanu looked down at his hands, remembering something. There was this one day we were filming a scene where the bus had to make a crazy turn. Everyone was tense, big stunt, one wrong move, and someone could get hurt. He smiled faintly. I was pacing, trying to focus, and Sandra came up, handed me a piece of gum and said, "Don't forget to chew, it helps with nerves." He laughed softly that moment. That small kindness, I remember it more than the stunt. The host leaned forward, his voice low. "Did you ever come close to telling her?" Keanu nodded, slowly, once he looked up at the ceiling as if watching the memory replay. We were sitting in her trailer. It was quiet, no crew, no noise, just music playing on a little speaker. I remember the song, some old blues track she had, her feet tucked under her, and was sipping tea. A pause. She looked over at me and said, "You're not as serious as people think." And I almost said it. Almost told her right then, but I didn't. He looked down again, more to himself than anyone else. I told myself, later, another day when it's safer. A long silence followed, then softly, but later never came. The host, now visibly affected, said gently, "You mentioned a letter that you kept it in a drawer for 15 years. What made you write it in the first place?" Keanu leaned back, looking as though he was digging through memories stored deep within. Was watching an old interview. She did. It wasn't even about me. She was just being herself, talking about what she loved, what scared her. And she said something that stuck with me. His eyes searched the air, trying to recall the exact words. She said, "I think the people who make me feel safe are the ones I never have to impress." He paused, and I realized that's how I always felt around her, safe. Not because she gave me permission, but because she just saw me. He looked at the audience, so I wrote the letter. I wrote it like you write something you never intend to send, no filters, no performance. The host asked, "Do you remember what it said?" Keanu nodded and slowly, deliberately began to recite more of it. His voice was quiet, but each word landed with precision. "You probably never knew this, but being near you made me feel human." Again, like I wasn't just an actor or a shadow of someone I used to be. "You never asked me to be anyone. You just sat with me, and I wish I'd told you how much that meant." He stopped. His throat moved as he swallowed hard. But I didn't send it because I thought silence was safer than rejection, or worse, regret. The host sat in silence, his expression open, raw. Keanu looked at the camera again. "I used to think time would wait for me, that there'd always be another project, another chance, but time doesn't wait. It doesn't pause for grief or fear or silence." He shifted forward slightly. "I spent years thinking love had to be earned through healing, that I had to fix myself before I could give someone anything real a beat. But maybe love is the thing that helps you heal." The audience stirred slightly, their motion visible now. Some wiped away tears quietly. Others simply listened, still and reverent. The host finally spoke. "What would you say to her now?" Keanu didn't hesitate. "That I never stopped caring, that I always wondered what might have happened if I just said it." He looked down at the floor, then back up. "And that I'm sorry, not for loving her, but for not having the courage to say it. When it could have mattered." Another pause, then a quiet admission. "And maybe I'm still carrying that letter even now." The host leaned in. "You ever think of sending it?" Keanu didn't smile this time, but his eyes softened. "No." A pause, "But maybe I could let her hear it like this." Like now. The audience didn't move, and Keanu looked directly into the camera. "Sandra, there's no agenda here, no ask now unfinished business, just a truth I kept too long, that you were in a world that often felt too loud. My silence, the good kind." The room was still. Even the host had tears in his eyes now, though he didn't wipe them away. No one wanted to break the spell. And then Keanu sat back in his chair. He looked lighter. Not because anything had been fixed, but because something had finally been released. He inhaled deeply, steadied his eye. "Voice, I kept that letter buried for 15 years, a long beat. And now maybe it's time I finally read it out loud." The studio lights dimmed further, casting a softer hue across the room. It wasn't dramatic. It was respectful, almost sacred. A stillness took over the space, not from fear, but from anticipation. Everyone in the audience leaned in quiet, present. Keanu sat with his hands lightly clasped in front of him. His expression wasn't performative. He wasn't trying to impress. He wasn't trying to evoke anything. He looked like a man ready to let something go. "I don't have the physical letter with me," he said, voice calm. "It's folded up in a drawer at home, faded, a little torn at the edges, but I've read it so many times I know it by heart." The host nodded silently, giving him space. Keanu turned slightly toward the audience, not directly at them, but as if addressing someone who might be among them or beyond the cameras. He took a breath and began. "Dear Sandra, I don't know how to begin this without sounding foolish or late or both, but maybe it's okay to be a little of each. This letter isn't a confession, it's not a request. It's just something I should have said a long time ago, and I didn't. You probably never knew the exact moment I started falling for you, but I remember it. We were on set midday. You had your feet up on a crate, sipping iced tea, talking to one of the boom operators about his daughter's school play. You weren't trying to impress anyone, you were just there, real kind, effortlessly yourself, and I thought, God, how does someone be like that? I admired you quietly, constantly, and somewhere along the way that admiration turned into something softer, deeper, something I didn't know how to name back then." He paused, the silence holding each word like a thread pulled tight. His voice remained steady, but there was a deep ache beneath its calm, not sadness. Exactly, more like reverence. You didn't know it, but you were. The calm in the middle of a very loud storm. There were days on that set I felt like I was sleepwalking, smiling for cameras, nodding through pain. But then you'd laugh, that full, unapologetic laugh of yours, and something inside me would actually wake up. I never told you this, but you made me feel safe, and I hadn't felt that in a long, long time. The camera cut briefly. To the audience, people sat, frozen, eyes wide, some glassy. The host, his usual composure, softened, didn't blink or move. Keanu looked down for a moment, recalling the next line from memory, and then lifted his eyes again. I told myself you'd never see me that way, that I was too broken, too serious, too much of a question mark. I thought she needs someone easy, someone who doesn't come with shadows. So I gave you silence instead of honesty, friendship instead of feeling, and I told myself it was enough. He swallowed hard but didn't falter. But here's the truth. Being around you felt like home. Not the home you're born into, the home you find after everything else has fallen apart. I didn't want to own you or define anything. I just wanted to be near you, to be part of your orbit. That was enough for a while, until it wasn't. Another pause, a beat. Then you once told a reporter that I was the guy who got away. What you didn't know is you were the one I never had the courage to reach for. But if I could go back, I'd do it differently, not to change what happened, not to write anything, just so I could sit next to you again in that trailer with the music playing low and say, hey, do we think I feel something more? The emotion had shifted now. Not sorrow, not regret, something else. Love, maybe still alive, not in a desperate way, but in a peaceful, undying kind of way. The kind of love that doesn't need to be returned to matter. Keanu's voice lowered even further. I never sent this letter because I thought I had time. Time to tell you, time to show up, time to heal first, but time isn't generous. It gives just enough to test whether you're brave, enough to use it, and I wasn't. He paused, eyes wet now, but not broken. So I'm saying this now, not because I expect anything, not because it changes what was, but because you deserve to know that someone loved you in the quiet, patient way that never asked for more than your presence. The audience was silent completely. Still, one woman in the third row wiped her cheeks. A man in the back leaned forward as if hearing something. He'd long forgotten how to believe in Keanu. Looked to the floor again, then lifted his gaze. You didn't know it, but you were my quiet place. He exhaled deeply, as if setting something down after carrying it for too long. The host was speechless. Moved open, Keanu leaned back in his seat slightly. His voice, though calm, carried the tremble of release. I never sent it because I thought I'd get another chance. A long silence then. But something happened recently, something small, but it woke me up. The host, his voice hushed, asked, what was it? Keanu glanced sideways. We saw each other again briefly at a benefit. She looked the same, maybe even brighter. We hugged and it was warm, and then it was over. He took a long breath, and later that day, I got a phone call, a health scare. Nothing fatal, but it was enough to remind me life doesn't wait. The audience listened in total stillness. I went home and re-watched an old interview of hers, I don't know why, just looking for something. Maybe he smiled softly, and in it she said, Keanu, I always thought he was the one that got away. The host leaned in sharply. She said that. Keanu nodded, slowly, visibly moved. She did a long pause, then more to himself than anyone, and I never replied until now. The air in the studio remained still, like it was suspended in time with him. Keanu sat quietly for a moment longer. After the final words of the letter, he seemed lighter, somehow, but also older, not in years, but in memory, in weight. The key host finally spoke gently, as if trying not to break the spell. You said, Something happened that made you realize you might be running out of time. Can I ask what it was? Keanu nodded. Slowly, it started with a conversation. The audience leaned in about 6 months ago. He continued. I was invited to a charity gala. Sandra was there. I didn't expect to see her, and she didn't expect to see me. We laughed when we noticed we were seated just 2 tables apart. He gave a faint smile. It had been years, and still she looked at me like no time had passed. That's who she is. She makes you feel like you've always been welcome. He paused, remembering we talked light stuff, weather, the food, the usual. LA small talk. Another pause, but underneath it all, there was a silence. The host blinked. A silence. Keanu nodded. Yes, a kind of shared silence, the kind that holds a question. A what if. He sat forwards lightly, elbows on his knees, fingers interlaced. Today was good to see her, but when we hugged goodbye, something in me felt unfinished. Not unsaid, unfinished. The room was quiet. He inhaled deeply. That same night I went home and got a call from my doctor. Routine blood work. Nothing serious, a small issue, with my heart rhythm easily managed. But I remember standing there in the kitchen, hearing those words and suddenly realizing this body won't last forever. He looked directly at the host. It wasn't about fear, it was about clarity. The host remained still, visibly moved. That's when I realized. Keanu said, we wait as if life owes us time, but it doesn't. He exhaled slowly. I'd spent decades waiting until I was healed. Waiting until it was the right time, waiting for signs, waiting to feel worthy. And then suddenly I realized there's no such thing as ready. There's just now. The audience didn't stir. His words sat with them, raw, direct, stripped of anything but truth. Keanu's voice dropped lower, almost to a whisper. So I did something I hadn't done in years. I went looking for pieces of the past. The host looked curious. What kind of pieces? Old interviews, photos, anything. I wanted to remember how it all started, the way we looked at each other. Before the world knew our names. Keanu gave a quiet, sad laugh. I found this clip, an old press junket from the speed release. We were sitting side by side, joking around, and then she looks at me. Just for a second, a look I'd forgotten, and I paused the video. He paused again, now reenacting the moment, and I said out loud to no one, why didn't I say something then? He shook his head. You think you have time, you think there will always be another project, another dinner, another conversation. His voice grew stronger, but then you hear your heartbeat skipping and you wonder if the next one will come, and suddenly all the things you didn't say echo. Louder than anything you ever did. The host, visibly affected, leaned forward slightly. What happened after that? Keanu let out a slow breath. I turned off the lights and sat in the dark. I tried to write a new letter, something to send her, but the words felt forced, too late, too polished. He met the host's eyes. That's when I knew this wasn't about rewriting the past, it was about telling the truth now, even if it doesn't change a thing. He looked to the audience because there's something sacred about saying it even if no one answers. The host nodded. What about the interview where she said you were the one that got away? What did that feel like to hear? Keanu smiled, but his eyes were far away. Bittersweet, beautiful, painful, all of it. A beat. I watched her say it with this little smile, like she wasn't even aware how deeply she meant it, that Sandra she gives without measuring the weight of what she's offering. He sat back, and I thought I spent so many years thinking I was protecting her by staying silent, but maybe I was just protecting myself from the fear that I might not be enough. The host exhaled. So now you're here. You've read the letter, you've told the story. What's next? Keanu didn't answer immediately. Then he looked directly into the camera again. Not dramatically, just calmly. As if speaking to one person. There's one more thing I haven't said. The host blinked, surprised. Keanu nodded. This isn't about a grand gesture. or a second chance, or even closure. It's about truth. The audience was silent, holding their breath. Keanu leaned forward just slightly, so if she's watching this, he took a breath. There's something I need to say. Not for the past, but for the now. The black screen lingered for just a breath longer than usual, as if giving space for what was coming. Then slowly, the lights in the studio rose again. Not fully, just enough to reveal Keanu still seated, his hands resting calmly in his lap. No cue cards, no music, just him. He looked up at the camera and blinked once, not out of nerves, but to ground himself. Repair. If she's watching this, he began, his voice steady. I want to say something I've never said. The host leaned back slightly. The audience was so silent that even small shifts in their seats were audible. I spent so many years believing I had to be healed before I could love. Keanu said that I had to fix everything inside me first, that I had to be whole before I could be good for someone else. He paused, his hands rubbed together once, then rested again. But that's not how love works. Not the real kind. He looked off to the side, not avoiding, just reflecting. Real love doesn't ask for perfection. It just asks you to show up. A long breath, and I didn't. He didn't rush. Every word came with the weight of years behind it. Thought the love I felt for her had to stay buried, that it was mine to protect, like a secret too fragile to survive daylight. He looked directly into the lens now. But the truth is, the longer you protect love from being spoken, the more it becomes something else. It becomes distance. It becomes memory. It becomes silence. The host sat still, his eyes damp but focused. Keanu leaned forward slightly, elbows on his knees. Sandra, I don't want anything from you. No response, no answer, no next step. His voice softened. I just want you to know I loved you. Not in a way that asks for more, but in a way that always has the audience stirred. Many blinking back tears. I didn't love you in the way movies show it, he continued. Not with fireworks or grand speeches or dramatic chases through airports. A faint smile. I loved you in the quiet, in the stillness, in the way you held your coffee with both hands, and the way you looked at people when you thought no one was watching. He paused, as if reliving a moment no one else could see. I loved you in that trailer when we were just sitting in silence and the world finally stopped spinning. He exhaled, closed his eyes for a moment. That was the closest I ever felt to home. A quiet sob came from somewhere in the audience. Not loud, just human. Someone feeling exactly what he was saying, someone who had lived it too. Keanu continued, eyes still on the camera. Maybe love doesn't always arrive to be lived out. Maybe some love is meant to be carried, not acted upon, but honored. It tilted his head slightly. And I've carried you in small ways, in quiet ones, through grief, through joy, through moments when I forgot who I was, but never forgot you. The host's hand covered, his mouth overcome. Keanu took one more breath, and this time looked not just at the camera, but beyond it, as if speaking into space. I forgive myself for not being ready, for not being brave. Then softer, and I thank you for never needing me to be more than I was. The air in the studio felt changed, like something invisible had been released. Like an invisible weight had been set down. The host finally spoke, voice low and reverent. Why now? Why say this here to all of us? Keanu looked over, eyes clear. Because I've learned that silence doesn't protect us, it just separates us. Pause. I spent my life trying not to need, trying not to reach, trying not to hurt. His voice dropped. But in doing that, I missed the chance to love out loud. The audience was silent, but their faces said everything. He turned to them now, for the first time directly, addressing those in the seats. If there's someone you love, really love, don't wait. Not for the right words, not for the perfect moment. Just tell them, even if your voice shakes, even if it's too late for anything to come of it. Because love isn't about what you get back. It's about what you give away freely. He looked around, slowly making eye contact with strangers who now felt like something more. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is tell someone they mattered to you. The host exhaled through his nose, a breath that had been held for too long. You really carried it for 25 years. Keanu nodded. I did, then added, and now maybe I don't have to anymore. The host sat back, visibly moved. What do you feel right now? Keanu thought for a moment. Grateful, has smiled. Not wide, not showy, just real, because love, even unspoken, even unanswered, still changes us. The host let those words hang. And if she's watching, Keanu looked back into the camera, then I hope she knows she was never alone in what she felt. He straightened, breathing in deeply, then slowly out. So if she's watching this, he paused, as if offering the moment to fate. Then with clarity, there's something I need to say. Not for the past, but for the now. The screen returned from black and the lighting in the studio had shifted again. It wasn't brighter, it was warmer, like morning light through a half-open window. It wasn't dramatic, it was honest. Keanu sat quietly, facing the audience now. Not as an actor, not even as a man with a story, but as someone who had let something go and was still standing. The host didn't speak right away. He seemed to know this final chapter wasn't his to guide. Keanu looked around the studio. Then slowly his eyes returned to the camera, and this time his voice came without hesitation. Sandra. The name carried no tension, now only reverence. I don't regret being quiet, not anymore. A long pause, because silence has its own kind of truth. It taught me how deeply I could feel, how long I could carry something without letting it destroy me. How love, even hidden, can still shape you. The audience sat still, tears in many eyes, but they weren't sad tears. Not really. They were the kind you cry when something makes sense inside you for the first time in years. I didn't say these things to change anything. I said them because they were real, and I think real things deserve to be spoken. He breathed in gently, as if this was the final page of a letter that had written itself across 3 decades. You don't owe me anything. Not your time. Not your memory. Not your forgiveness. A small smile. But if you ever wondered whether I saw you, the answer is yes. I saw everything, and I loved it all. He turned slightly to face the audience, and to everyone here, anyone listening, maybe you have someone you loved quietly, someone who never knew a beat. I hope you tell them. But if you can't, I hope you honor it anyway. Love doesn't disappear just because it wasn't returned, and it doesn't lose its meaning just because it went unspoken. The host looked down, visibly moved, then back up. Do you regret it? Keanu thought about that for a moment, then shook his head slowly. Not for loving her in silence, boys, but for waiting too long to call it love. The room was still. No applause, no music, just the quiet breath of everyone present, holding the weight of a truth finally set free. Then one by one the audience stood, not like a performance curtain call, not like a celebrity farewell, but like a vigil, a ceremony, a final reverent moment for something sacred. Keanu didn't wave, he didn't bow, he just sat there, present, whole in a way he hadn't been before. His eyes glistened, but he didn't cry. He smiled gently. And then you don't have to marry someone to love them for a lifetime.